الأنبياء والمرسلين الإمام المتقين قائد غر المحجلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So one thing that we haven't done so far, we've talked a lot about the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. One thing we haven't done is we haven't done any salawat ala Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There's a hadith of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that a man came to the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and he said, Ya Rasulullah, how much of my dhikr every day, right? Sahaba used to do dhikr, a certain amount of dhikr every day. So, which is called a good. How much of my dhikr every day should I dedicate to you? And he said, if you do a third, he said, should I do a third? He said, more. He said, should I do a half? He said, more. He said, what happens if I do all of it? He said, Allah will remove all of your sorrows and difficulties and will give you ease. And that's very fitting for our topic today, because our topic today is going to be about how the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam managed sorrow, grief, and difficulty. And I find whenever I speak to, for lack of a better term, Gen Z, right? Whenever I speak to the Gen Zs, y'all the saddest generation I've ever known. Really, and not as in being your son, but like there's the levels of depression and anxiety and things like that in Gen Z is quite high. It's back when I was growing up, right? The question that everybody asked the sheikh was, is this halal or is this haram? That was a question everybody asked the sheikh. And more when somebody comes in to talk, people come and ask them, how do I deal with being sad all the time? And I find that very, the intellectual side of me is wow, that's very fascinating. Let's study it. But the human side of me is it's very sad. But alhamdulillah for being Muslim. Alhamdulillah for being Muslim. Because one of the fascinating things about Islam, right? One of the fascinating things about the prophet stories. Never have a prophet story where the prophet is where the Nabi is living a good time, having a good life, except for one, right? And that is who? Sulaiman alayhi salam. And even Sulaiman alayhi salam, it's not like he's living carefree. Sulaiman alayhi salam has a lot of responsibility, and that's his trial. All the other prophets go through immense amount of trial, immense amount of tribulation, right? Let's start with Adam alayhi salam. Adam alayhi salam is kicked out of Jannah, right? He's made to exit Jannah. And he has to deal with a culture shock of living in dunya when he's grown up in Jannah. Nuh alayhi salam, right? He spends 950 years preaching to these skullhead, just thick-skulled, belligerent, stubborn people who never believe in him. And then in the end, his own wife and his own son drowned. Right? Look at Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam, his dad, or his uncle in some narrations, throw him into the fire. Right? Ibrahim alayhi salam's own dad throws him into the fire. And he has to escape his village with only one person, or his city, with only one person believing in him, and that's Lut alayhi salam. So Lut alayhi salam. Lut alayhi salam spends God knows how long with these people. And then when the angels come to tell him about the destruction of his own people assault the angels, or try to. And then his own wife is destroyed with those people. Okay? Let's look at Yacoob alayhi salam. Yacoob alayhi salam used to be rich and powerful and mighty, and then he got terribly sick. horribly sick. And he lost everything. And he stayed in that state, in a state of patience, for decades. With the only person who was with him was his wife. Okay? Let's look at Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam grows up basically an orphan. He grows up as an orphan in the house of the very people who was killing all his people and enslaving them. And then when he grows up and he tries to do something for his own people, he ends up accidentally killing a man and having to leave everything that he's known and escaping into the desert. Right, let's look at Yusuf and Yacoob alayhi salam. Yusuf alayhi salam is thrown into a well, sold into slavery, put into prison, right? And then finally he becomes the prime minister. You go through the prophet stories, and there's no prophet story where it's like, yeah, he lived, he was born, lived a fairly normal childhood, went to college, got a 9 to 5, got married, had kids. Those kids grew up, got married, and then he died. Like, that is not the life of a prophet. That is not the life of a prophet. All prophets went through immense amount of difficulty. So the reason why I bring that up is because of a couple of things. The first question a lot of people have when they go through difficulty themselves, when they feel depressed, when they feel sad, when they feel real sorrow and grief, is why is this happening to me? It's the first question that everyone has is, why is this happening to me? Why do I have to feel like this? And the second question that a lot of people have is, does God hate me? And if you were in a religion in which, if God loves you, you have a good life, right? You would have a different answer. But you're a Muslim. And so your answer is always your worldly situation has no correlation to how much Allah loves you. Your worldly circumstance and your emotional circumstance has no correlation with how Allah loves you or does not love you. Some of the people that Allah loved the most went through the most hardship. Yacoob alayhi salam. We're going to talk about this here in a second. But Yacoob alayhi salam, he lost one son over decades, and then for decades he had lost that son. Then he lost a second son, and then he lost a third son. And he becomes so overwhelmed by his grief, he cries so much that his eyes become white, like he goes blind from crying. So, but Yacoob alayhi salam is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yacoob alayhi salam is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that he has such a high degree with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the same with Ayyub alayhi salam. Ayyub alayhi salam, he gets to a point where he's just like, his patience is at its limit. And yet, he is somebody that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really loves. And it's the same with the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We want to touch on particularly two moments in the life of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that he said were the hardest for him. One is called Aam al-Huzn, and the other one is when he goes to Taif. But to understand, like to set up the stories, we have to understand the situation in which the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam found himself after he declared his prophet. And this is one of the reasons why we talked about the economic circumstance in Mecca for a while, right? The economic circumstance in Mecca, how did Mecca make most of its money? It made most of its money through trade. And it made most of its money through trade with the other Arab tribes, as well as the routes from Yemen and Syria. And so, and the reason why Mecca had this prestige was because it was a place where everybody came and put their gods. All tribes had different gods. and they would come and they would put those gods in the Kaaba. So when the Rasul ﷺ said, by the way, all your idols are nonsense and there's only one Allah, right? He's not just threatening their religious life. He's not just threatening their religious life. He's also threatening their entire economic existence. Because what they feel is, if we break our idols and we only worship Allah, no one's going to come to us. We're going to lose all our prestige. The Hajj, which is like this massive commercial enterprise, will all fall apart. Right? Nobody's going to come worship just Allah in the Kaaba. They want to come worship their gods. So if we believe in the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our commercial enterprise is all going to go completely, right? There's an ayah in the Quran where, and then on top of that, we're going to piss off all the Arabs and they're going to come and like kick us out. Because that's kind of how the Quraysh took over Mecca. Was the tribe that had Mecca initially, they pissed off all the Arabs and then the Quraysh came and took over. So, there's an ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they say that if we believe in you, we will be cast out of our own land. This is their fear. They're going to become poor and they're going to lose all their prestige. They're going to get kicked out of Mecca. This is their fear. And the Rasul, but at the same time, they can't deny the power of the Quran. And they can't deny the sensibility of the message. It just makes a lot of sense. And to the point where there were two leaders of Quraysh, Abu Sufyan and Walid ibn al-Mughira. Walid ibn al-Mughira loved Quran. And so did Abu Sufyan. They loved Quran. They loved to hear it. They loved to listen to it. But they were kuffar through and through. Abu Sufyan converts at the end. But Walid ibn al-Mughira never does. And so one day the Rasul ﷺ is reciting Quran in his house, and Walid ibn al-Mughira is like, you know what? I know he recites Quran every night, so I'm going to go outside of his window and I'm going to listen to it at night, in the middle of the night, so that nobody here sees me. So he sneaks in the middle of the night and shows up. And when he gets there, Abu Sufyan is standing there, and he's looking at him like, "What are you doing here?" He's looking like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I'm doing here what you're doing here." So they loved Quran, and they loved the message. They understood that the message is true, but they couldn't believe it. Because if they believed, they would lose their economic and their social status. And so what did they do? They decided they were going to, they decided they were going to try to put an end to the message altogether. And that was through a series of campaigns of persecution. So, for example, Bilal bin Rabah, radiallahu anhu, was an Ethiopian slave of Abu Jahl. Some say Abu Jahl, and the other one is, I can't remember the other one. But he believed in the message of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so what they would do is they would take him out into the middle of the desert, in the middle of the day, where it's like the sun is kind of beating down, right? Has anybody tried to walk barefoot on the pavement in the middle of like summer, right? That hurts, right? It's pretty nasty. They would now imagine all that is sand and not pavement, right? Sand constantly just kind of soaks in the sunlight. It's pretty bad. They would lay him down on the sand, and they would take a massive rock and press it on him, so that he would put his skin would push into the sand. They would feel the heat even more, and then and his sons say to him, you're constantly remembering Yusuf. You will remember him until you destroy yourself. This is one of the most powerful ayahs in my life in the Quran. He says, "What's got to do with you?" He basically says to his sons, what does God do? I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. When I turned around and I said, yeah, and I said, complained of my sorrow for Yusuf, I wasn't talking to you. He says, إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I complain of my despair and my sorrow to Allah. And that's exactly what the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was doing under the tree of fire. He's complaining of his despair and his sorrow to Allah. So now, to me, this is the most important thing about how to deal with depression, anxiety, sorrow, grief as Muslims. It is to know that the one who made all of the universe is listening to you. The one who created the entirety of the universe is listening to you. And he's not just listening to what you want. He is listening to what you feel. And you can tell everybody what you feel, but you kind of feel like, you might not really understand what I'm feeling. Like you talk to somebody, somebody's really nice, they're sitting there listening to you, but they've never been through it, they don't know what it feels like. Allah created the very idea of feeling. Nobody understands you like Allah. Nobody hears you like Allah. Nobody appreciates you like Allah. You don't have to explain your feeling to Allah. He already knows it. He already understands it. He already appreciates it. So you complain of what you feel to Allah. And there's a lot of circumstances people are in where you feel like people are being unfair to you. Right? Sometimes you're in a family situation in which you feel like people are being unfair to you and you have no power for it. You can't prove it and you have no power against it. When you complain of your feeling to Allah, you are complaining to the one who is all-knowing. Right? If nobody else in the world believes you, Allah believes you. If nobody else in the world understands you, Allah understands you. If nobody else in the world has a power to do anything, Allah has power to do it. But, you have to make Allah your friend. And the way you make Allah your friend is, tell me, you know that friend who only calls you when you need something, right? It's like you don't hear from this guy for 7 months, and then suddenly you get a phone call, hey, what's going on, buddy? And you're like, oh man, you need something, right? We all have that friend. Don't be that friend with Allah. Don't be that friend with Allah. It's like, finals coming up, gotta do the tahajjud. Set the alarm. Didn't study all semester, skipped all the classes, but you're up at 4:30. Ya Allah, I need an A. And then when the finals are over, you're barely making fun. Same thing, you're going along with your life, suddenly this woman enters the room and you're like, oh my God. And then you pull out the phone and okay, Allah. Okay. Wake up at the tahajjud, Ya Allah, please give me Fatima. I will do anything I want Fatima. Right? And then, that whole thing goes disastrously and you're like, and or maybe you get married and you like never pray the Hajj again in your life. Don't be that friend with Allah. If you want Allah to be your friend, be His friend. If you want Allah to be your friend, be His friend. This means, you make your prayers, right? And this is, Salah is very interesting. Salah is very, very interesting. All of the ibadat are about sacrificing something for Allah. All of the ibadat, all of the worships are about sacrificing something for Allah. Zakat is easy, right? Zakat, everybody knows what zakat is. You're sacrificing the money, right? It's the easiest one to understand what you're sacrificing. Siyam, you're sacrificing food and drink, right? What are you sacrificing with Salah? What are you sacrificing with Salah? Time. You're sacrificing time. And and you're not just sacrificing it once a day, twice a day. You're sacrificing it 5 times a day. Right? You're sacrificing more time. Most of us sacrifice more time for Salah than we do for our own parents. Time is the most valuable commodity a human being has. Right? Because time is the type of thing that whether or not you're spending it, you've lost it. Right? Time is always it's constantly going. And it's that commodity that Allah asks you to sacrifice 5 times a day. That's the power of Salah. When you understand what Allah is asking you to sacrifice for. That you're going to put X amount of hours in this, X amount of hours in this, X amount of hours in this. What about me? How much time are you going to put in me? And the fact of the matter is, it's not money that makes relationships, right? The amount of the gifts that you give to somebody is not what makes that relationship. The amount of times you go to IHOP at 3 a.m. in the morning is not what makes that relationship, right? It's not the food and drink. It's the time you put in a relationship that makes it. By the way, that's a very personal thing. I have this one particular friend that I'm always I get up at 4 o'clock and I'm like, hey, Omar, you want to IHOP? And Omar's the type of person, he cannot say no to breakfast food. So I will call him at 4, hey, you want to go to IHOP? We'll be there at 5:30. So time is the thing that makes relationships. The person you spend your time with is the one you end up being closest to. How much time are you spending with Allah? How much time are you giving to Allah? If you want to have Allah as your friend, then you have to make Him your friend by spending time with Allah. And you spend that time through Salah, you spend that time through dhikr, you spend that time through Quran. These are your 3 main ways of spending time with Allah. Salah, dhikr, Quran. And then, you're just kind of hanging out with a friend for 6 months, and you guys have a great time, whatnot. Then some trouble hits. Something bad happens. Every week you guys meet at, we'll take my example, and I say IHOP, right? You guys meet at IHOP. Every week. The week that the trouble hits, you show up. That week is a very meaningful meeting that the two of you are going to have. That week, you're going to talk about all your problems. That week, you're going to talk about all your sorrows, your difficulties, all the things you're going through. And the regularly scheduled programming that's just kind of everything, this is what we do every week, turns super meaningful that one time. Because it was a time where you needed him, you needed her, and they were there for you. Or vice versa. That's what Salah is like during difficulty, when you're regular with your Salah. You're there every day, praying every day, right? Sometimes, we all have the check-in prayer, where it's like, okay, I got this to do, this to do, this to do. Salah's here, I'm just gonna check it in real quick. And so you run in, you're like, Allah, and then you're done, right? We all have to check in prayers. Sometimes you just check it in. Sometimes you're really at it, right? Then trouble hits. Difficulty happens. You feel like terrible. You feel horrible. Then for that salah that you're going to make, your wudu becomes very, very purposeful. Your walk to your place of prayer becomes very purposeful because you know this meeting with Allah, I'm going to lay it all down. I'm just going to lay it all out. And then after that salah, you make dua. And that dua you make is like a dua you've never made in your life. But unless you're constant, you don't have that moment. If that's just a kind of a one-time thing, it's not the same as when you're constant, and then you have that moment. So if you want to be friends with Allah, you have to spend time with Him. And then, when you've spent time with Him, He's your friend, and you raise your hand and you complain. You leave everything with Him. You raise your hands and you leave everything with Allah. And that dua is completely different than the person who just needs an A in the finals. So that's one way. That's one part of handling the difficulties that we have in our life, is leaving everything at the doorstep of Allah. The second way is the hijrah. After all of that, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Allah is his friend. Allah is he is constantly making dua with Allah, but he doesn't just kind of sit there and be like, you know what, Allah is all powerful, so I'm just going to sit there like this, and suddenly the world is going to change around. Everything will become rose gardens and happiness, and everyone's going to become Muslim, and everything's going to end. Everything's going to be happy. The Rasul keeps looking for allies. He keeps looking for allies to get himself, to get Muslims out of the oppressive circumstance in Mecca. And finally, he finds those allies in Medina. Medina was a very troubled city. Medina had two tribes, the Aus and the Khazraj. And this was like the Bloods and the Crips, right? Absolutely hated each other. They had a series of wars. They were constantly fighting with each other. Constantly, it was very bloody wars. And it had taken a city that was an agricultural hub. Medina was an agricultural hub because it was like on an oasis. It took a city that was an agricultural hub and devastated it. And these people were done. These people were done with their animosity. They realized they needed a change. And what was going to be their change? Their change was going to be the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said, if you come, he sent them a few people to teach them about Islam and the teachings of Islam, and they were like, look, this is what we need. In order to flip the script here, this is what we need. And so they came and they invited him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, back to Medina with the Muslims to make peace between the two tribes. And so the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted, and he left in the dead of night from Mecca and went to Medina. And the moment he went to Medina, all of everything flipped. Everything changed, right? He went from being oppressed and repressed to being free and liberated. He went from being looked down at and repressed to being the leader of the people. He went from being in a hard economic circumstance to people who were dedicated to funding the cause. So the moment he went to Medina, everything fled. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on the hijrah, but unfortunately we're running out of time because we gotta get question and answers too. Right? That's where all the meat and potatoes. But what I will say is, we talk a lot about tawakkul. Right? We talk a lot about tawakkul and what it means to have tawakkul on Allah. If your idea of tawakkul, there was a group of people who were sitting in like the masjid, and they were just like doing dhikr and making salah and stuff. Now Umar walks into them, and he's like, "What y'all doing?" And they're like, "Oh, we're doing dhikr." Like, how do you eat? Like, you don't do anything with your like in the day. It's like a full-time job, like salah and dhikr and whatnot. That's your full-time job. How do you eat? And like, oh, our brothers provide for us. And like, your brothers are better than you. There was another group of people, the same group of people. He walks in on them and he's like, how do you guys get anything done in your life? Like, you just sit here and pray and don't do anything, right? Like, they're completely out of the job market, as it were. And they're like, no, we do tawakkul on Allah. And he's like, no, this is not tawakkul. This is tawakkul, where it's like you become a freeloader on somebody else. So there's tawakkul and there's tawakkul. There's leaving your affairs in the hands of Allah, and then there's being a freeloader. The difference between the two is understood by the moment of the hijrah. Does the Rasul not have tawakkul on Allah during the whole thing? Of course he does. It's complete tawakkul on Allah. But that means, what tawakkul means is, you make an effort to make your circumstance better. And then you have tawakkul on Allah. You don't just sit there. You don't just sit there and be like, you know what? Allah created the universe, He can create my solution. And so you just sit there and you make like lots of adhkar and lots of salah and be like, where's the solution? Hello? Right? Tawakkul is not freeloading. You have to act. You have to do something. You have to try. To constantly be trying. And your tawakkul is not that Allah will solve your problem while you're sitting there. Your tawakkul is that Allah will create the solution out of your effort. That the effort that you put in, Allah will direct that effort to whatever is best for you. But if you're not putting in effort, there's no direction. You have to put in effort. Just like the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't just sit in Mecca and wait for Islam to be stamped out. He put effort. He went to Ta'if, he got stoned out of Ta'if. He sent delegations to all sorts of different tribes to look for a place where Muslims would have safe haven. And Allah directed that effort to Yathrib, Medina, which also happened to be the city of his mother. His mother was from Yathrib. And the city where his father died. So this is the two-pronged way of dealing with difficulty, sorrow, hardship, depression. The first is make friends with Allah. Make friends with Allah. And leave all of your sorrows, complain everything to Him. And the second is get off your butt. And that is extremely important. Don't sit in the seat and say, woe is me. If you have problems in your life, write down what your problems are, and don't think about what other people are doing. Think about what you can do about your problems. And then have tawakkul that Allah is going to direct your effort to that which is best for you. Make Him your friend. have reliance on him, and then do something. Do something. And whatever you do, know. And when you do, don't just be like, don't. When you choose what to do, think about whether it makes him happy or not, right? So like, I'm poor, so I will sell drugs because Brother Saad told me I should do something with money. No, but that first, don't sell drugs. Secondly, when you choose what to do, right? When Allah is your friend and you're doing tawakkul on Him, you should also be thinking about how your actions are going to affect that friendship with Allah. How your actions are going to affect that friendship you have with Allah. Because you can do a lot of things when you're in difficult circumstances, but not all of them will affect your friendship with Allah well. Many of them will affect your friendship with Him very badly. And so you always prioritize that relationship that you have with Allah. So this is our 3 things with the one addendum to the third one. Make Allah your friend. Be sure that He is going to direct you towards what is your solution. Do something about your problems with the addendum of always making sure that whatever you do is pleasing to Allah. Okay. So inshallah, that's what we have from the Seerah today, and we're going to open the floor for questions and answers. Around time. You can go to onlinequestions.org, put in this code, and then that will send the questions to what's your name? Manar. And then Manar will read out the questions as long as they're appropriate.
Yeah. Please, be respectful. I don't think I have to say it, but.
Oh, you always gotta say it. You always gotta say it. Young adults in the room, tell them to ask questions. Always gotta say, make sure it's appropriate.
We've had some interesting questions.
Oh yeah, bro. The first question somebody asked was, "Is it permissible to celebrate the Milad?" No, is it permissible to celebrate the Milad? And I was like, man, y'all brought me here, sat me down, and asked, "Brother, would you like to start fitting in the community?" Are there any questions then?
Yes, I'll go ahead and start with this one. Can we, in addition to Salah, Dhikr, and Quran, build our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by implementing the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And then the most important sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is service to other people. Service to other people. There's a very powerful hadith where the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Al-khalqu iyalullah," that people are the dependents of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَحَبُّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِعِيَالِهِ. And the most beloved people to Allah are the ones who are most useful to His dependents. If I start telling you stories, I'll start getting goosebumps, so I'm not going to do it. But let me just tell you, every time there's a difficulty in your life, you are going to meet someone who needs your help. Every time there's a difficulty in your life, you're going to meet someone who is going to need your help. And if you help them for the sake of Allah, Allah will help you. I have seen this so many times in my life and the life of other people. That Allah will ask you, you want me to do for you, what are you going to do for somebody else? Look for the people who need help in your life, help them, Allah will help you.
Next question, how do you get over heartbreak?
Heartbreak, sappy country songs. Uh, uh, it's a very difficult question. All right, this is my brother asked a very good question. Because I'm going to approach this. This is a very I understand the age group, so it's a very important question. And I'm just okay. Let me structure this real quick. Okay, good. First and foremost, guys, girls don't mean everything. And girls, guys don't mean everything. Okay? This is the most important thing to like set the framework here, okay? Because you can let yourself go like just completely spiral. You can let yourself completely spiral. If you go down the whole, sappy country love song route. And the most important thing to know is you were not put on this earth so that you can listen to sappy country love songs. That was not your purpose of existence. Okay? The purpose of your existence was to serve Allah. This is the purpose of your existence. The purpose of your existence is to love and serve Allah. So, what does that have to do with heartbreak? When you find your purpose in your service of Allah, you will find the person who is going to be your companion in that service. Okay? When you, what do I mean by purpose? What I mean is when you understood your talents and you understood your interests and you get a passion for doing something, but you want to dedicate it to the service of Allah. Let's say you're a very good artist. Let's say you're a very good artist. You're just a bona fide Picasso. All right? And you are developed the skills to actually start painting very well. And that has given you a passion for painting. Now ask yourself for your painting, how am I going to turn this into service of Allah? How am I going to turn painting into something that benefits the whole Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because I guarantee you start thinking about it, you will find that. You will find that way. Then, when you do that, you will find the person who will support you in being the best painter possible towards the direction of that helps serve the Ummah Muhammad's law. As long as you have no purpose in your life, for boys, girls will become your purpose, and for girls, boys will become your purpose. As long as you have no purpose in your life, that's what's going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to be like, oh, he didn't like me, she didn't like me, why didn't she like me? I wish she'd like me. Because that became your whole purpose. And by the way, I understand heartbreak better than most people understand heartbreak, right? There's this caricature of the religious speaker who gets there and like, why did you love a girl? You should have loved Allah, right? That's not me, right? I understand. I understand heartbreak really well, better than most people understand heartbreak. But let me tell you this, as somebody who's been there, done that. When you find your purpose, what you start looking for in another person is going to be entirely different. When you find your purpose in life, what you're going to look for is the person who will be your rock for your purpose, and you will be their rock for their purpose. The Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam His purpose was spreading the message to people. And Khadija anha was his wife. She was the rock for his purpose. So, first step, y'all need to find your purpose in life. And the formula for purpose, I will tell you the formula for purpose right now. The formula for purpose is each one of y'all has talents. Right? This is personally, like, so, you know, I have absolutely no talent for painting. None, zero, right? Drawing, painting, anything hand-eye coordination, zero. I make stick figure drawings that my 6-year-old niece laughs at, okay? No matter how much time and effort I put into developing it, I will never be a good painter, never be a good drawer. That's not my talent, right? So that's a talent. It's just natural. Your natural floor, your natural ceiling or something, right? Then there are skills. Skills is talent when it's turned, when you put your talent into creating a craft and you become very good at that, that's your skill, right? So your natural ability to draw, and then you learn all the techniques and you put time and effort into it, that becomes your skill. Then you have interest, right? I have talents in like music, but that's completely not my interest. Right? I would never go into music because I'm just not interested in it. When you turn your talents into skills and put your skills into your interests, you get passion. Right? You take your talents that you're naturally good at, you develop them into skills that you need to be successful at it. And then you put that towards something you're interested in, that creates a passion. But that's still not a purpose. Your purpose needs to be your cause. In order to get your purpose, you need to get a cause. And the cause of every Muslim is serving Allah by serving the people of Allah. So once you find your passion, find how your passion is going to serve the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that will become your purpose in life. Once you get that purpose, you will find the person you need who is going to help you be the person you need and want to be in order to fulfill your purpose. So how do you get over heartbreak? You find a purpose. That's how you get over heartbreak. You recognize, first and foremost, that Allah allowed the heartbreak to happen because you had to grow as a person. And whoever, accepted you, didn't accept you, rejected you, whatever, that happened because had they accepted you, you would never have grown to be the person you need to be. Your heartbreak is going to turn you into the person that you didn't even know at the time that you wanted that person. You didn't even know then that you needed to be somebody else. And that's what your heartbreak is going to turn you into. And then when you get your purpose, you will find the person that's right for you. Yes. All right. Long-winded.
Sorry, no. Lars. Okay. This one says, Ustadh, I've had this idea in my head about depression and happiness that I will go through hardship when I'm young, but ultimately when I hit 30, everything will be better. But now I've come to the realization that that's not true. My question is, how do I deal with sorrow and not having my storybook ending? When I become 50, will I still be depressed?
That 30 thing hit so hard. Like, oh yeah, I thought I'd be all okay by 30. Yeah, me too. It did not turn out that way. No, okay. All of life, right? All of life is a series of trials. It's a really powerful ayah in the Quran, by the way. This ayah in the Quran is terrifying. It says, Alif Lam Mim, أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. Alif Lam Mim, do people really think that they will say we believe and they will not be tested? We tested the ones that came before them, and we knew to know which one of them was telling the truth and which one was lying. life is going to go like this. Life is not like this, life is not a Disney movie, right? Where like you have exposition and that's your childhood, and then it goes, like this, and then climax, and then end of character, like credits, right? Life is not a Disney movie. Your credits, right, or rather your what you're working towards in life is that your death is the climax of the movie. That's what you're working for in life. There are some people who's like they work so that they're climaxing in their life, and then they have a great life, and then they die. Then they go to hell. Right? Like that's what some people work for in their life. You work so that your death is the climax of your movie. So that is where you get the reward. So your storybook is your life, and your death is your climax. And life is going to go like this. Life is going to go like this. Right? Some days it's going to be happy, some days it's going to be sad. Some days it's going to be happy, some days it's going to be sad. If that's like constantly like this, then you need to go see a doctor. But like some days it's going to be like hard and difficult, and some days it's going to be easy, and that's just life. That's the whole story. And the fact is that yes, at 50 you will have moments of sadness and sorrow and depression. And at 65 you will have moments of sorrow and depression. But that doesn't mean that your life wasn't worth it, your life wasn't good, because that's all your story. And that end is what you're waiting for. Or that end is what you're building. That end is what you're building. The Rasul said, Al-hayatu mazra'at al-akhirah. That the life is the farmland of the akhirah. Meaning you reap what you sow. Right? You harvest whatever you grew. So, inshallah, all of us will have storybook endings. And those storybook endings will be Jannah. But that also doesn't mean that you accept living in a miserable life. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Nobody go from here and say, well, Saad said, nor to be that Muslim, you have to be miserable. That is where tawakkul comes in. Where, okay, I'm miserable. Great. No, not great, but like, I'm miserable. But how do I get out of that misery, right? That is, make friends with Allah, have tawakkul in Him, and work on it. Work on it. I cannot stress this enough. Work on your problems. Put effort. There's a certain amount of comfort in depression. What do I mean by this? There's a comfort in depression. What I mean is, it's very comfortable leaving your problems to other people and not feeling like I am the one who has to do something about it. It's very comfortable to say, oh, I feel very sad, I feel very bad, and this is how I'm going to remain. It's very hard to say I feel terrible and I am dissatisfied with feeling terrible and I'm going to fix it. If you have depression, right? If you have sorrows, griefs, anxieties, there's very few people who understand how you feel like I do. There's very few people who understand how I feel like how you feel like I do. But don't waste years of your life without taking an effort to change your circumstance. Because let me tell you, as somebody who's been through the journey, the moment you decide I'm going to change it, that's when your true journey begins. The moment you decide it's enough. I've had enough of not being the person I'm capable of being depressed, of being overwhelmed by my emotions. As the moment you say I've had enough, that's when the journey begins. That's when the true struggle begins. And that's when you really get to, and again, like I'm saying, I'm not saying this is like, somebody's like looking at from the outside being like, oh, you're depressed, just don't be, I'm saying this is somebody who's been through the journey. Somebody who's been through all the levels of the journey and come out on the other side. It begins when you say, I've had enough.
Okay, so kind of going back to the question before about finding our purpose. Question posed is, if our purpose is to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does this mean we should limit our emotional attachment to others?
No, that's dumb. The Rasul, there's this incredible hadith where Aisha anha was the Rasul was mending his shoes. Okay, back in the day, they didn't throw away everything that broke or ripped or anything. They would fix them. So the Rasul was mending his shoes, and the sunlight hit him in such a way that it kind of illuminated him. And Aisha anha, she was looking at him, and like she became awestruck in that moment. And she said to him, the poet says to you, the poet says, when the poet says this line, he was actually talking about you. And the line was that my beloved illuminates in the or lights up in the sun as if she's the sun herself. And so he went over to her and he kissed her and he said, Ya Aisha, you are this to me and more. Those who had very powerful relationships, very loving relationships. There was nobody who was more connected to Allah, but he had incredible relationships with everybody. Going back to his relationship with Aisha, in fact, all of the Sahaba knew that they should wait to ask him for permission for things when it was his time to spend time with Aisha, because he loved her so much. So whenever it was his time to spend time with her, he would be very happy. And so they would wait for him, like, okay, this is his day, he's going to spend with Aisha. All the Sahaba would show up and like, by the way, can we get something? There was a man who came from a trip, and he asked him, Ya Rasulullah, who is the most beloved person to you? And he said, Aisha. And he said, no, from the men. He said, her father. He had immense love for everybody around him, and incredible relationships with them. So your purpose in life being to serve the community of being to serve Allah by serving His people, that has nothing to do with whether or not you have strong relationships. In fact, having strong relationships, love with Muslims and the community of the Rasul is from the Sunnah. Love your brothers. The Rasul constantly said, love each other. And he had many different ways he gave to increase love. He said, tahaddu, exchange gifts and your love will increase with each other. Things like that.
Okay. What should you do if you make your best effort but the doors are still closed? I give an example, trying to get there.
Don't worry, I already knew that one. It's an addendum to the heartbreak one. Okay. There's this thing of dua where like, okay, if you make dua, then Allah will give you what you want or better, right? It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes the way it works is you make lots and lots of dua, and what Allah shows you is that, there's that thing of like, if God closed the door, He opens the window, that thing, right? Sometimes Allah shows you're in the wrong neighborhood, knocking on the wrong doors, asking the wrong questions. And then He takes you to the right neighborhood. Sometimes Allah sends you on a journey. And you think like, okay, my journey is at the end of this journey, I'm going to marry, I don't know, whoever this girl is. And in order to get to that point, you had to cross X, Y, Z, and you grew as a person. And then you get to the end, and she's like, no. And I go, what was the point of the whole thing? The point was the growth. She was the excuse. Character development, exactly, right? There's that constant meme on Twitter where it's like, it's the if I have to go through any more character development, I'll develop as a villain, right? It's that, but it's that thing where like, okay, so whatever you wanted was the excuse. And what you were supposed to get out of it in the first place was to become the person you are at the end. It's a good meme. All right, but yeah, so sometimes the doors are closed, right? Sometimes those doors were never meant to be opened, right? For now, right? If you're talking about like a particular person, you're talking about marriage, right? That time will come. Keep knocking on those doors. Keep developing as a character, not to a villain. And eventually, when you become the person you were always meant to be, the door will open.
Journey, not destination.
Yes, exactly. This is I'm going back to my boy, Abad. Abad has an incredible line. He says, रगों में गर्दिश खून है अगर तो क्या हासिल हयात शौक सफर के सिवा कुछ और नहीं. He says, if blood is flowing in your veins, what have you achieved? If blood is flowing in your veins, what have you achieved? Life is nothing but the passion for journey.
So the last one is, what is the difference between being productive to deal with your pain versus being productive to neglect your pain?
It's excellent. Brother asked a very good question. Y'all have some really good questions. One is looking for purpose. The other one is running away from purpose. So there's, the classic. I'll just ask you guys. What's the classic way guys deal with breakup? Gym, right? Every single guy. If a guy gets a gym membership, and starts posting biceps on Instagram, right? You know exactly what happened.
Yes.
All right. Stop pointing fingers at each other, guys. Yeah, of course, it's a gym, right? The Instagram bicep pics. That's like the number one. There was a breakup. Like she buys new clothes and does the whole Instagram blow up thing, and he goes to the gym and starts posting bicep pics. Like this is how someone who went through a big breakup, right? So the way you know that one is running away from the pain and the other one is actually trying to find a purpose in life is the purpose of the first, right? The purpose of the first is to get you through a difficult time. The purpose of the second is to get you to Jannah. And that's very different, right? When you're putting your time and effort into something to try to run away from pain, that's not healthy. When you're putting your time and effort into something because you know that at the end of the day, this is my purpose in life, I'm trying to find what it is that is going to be my role in this community that is going to get me into Jannah. That's a completely different way of thinking. Completely different way of thinking. And also, by the way, if the thought, wish you could see me now, comes into your mind, that's also a teller, right? That's also a teller. If she still lives in your head rent free, that's a straight tell. Okay, is that it?
Actually, there's one more.
Oh.
How do we deal with the depression of our parents?
It's not yours. It's the most important thing to remember. It's not yours.
Could you repeat that question?
How do we deal with the depression of our parents?
The most important thing to remember about anything if your parents have anxiety, if your parents have depression, if your parents have paranoia, panic, fear, that is not yours. Okay? That is not yours. Your parents' depression is not your depression. Your parents' anxiety is not your anxiety. Your parents' panic is not your panic. Think about what your responsibility as a child is to your parents, like as a grown child. You're not like 5 years old anymore, but like as children of your parents, what your responsibility to them is, it's to lift them up, right, and to be there for them. But their sadness and grief is not yours. It's not yours to deal with, and it's not yours to have to solve. You have to be there for them in their difficulty, like with any friend, right? You be there for them with any difficulty. You help them through things, right? And if you can help them with their emotions as well, that's very good as well. But don't internalize it. Don't internalize their grief, and don't internalize their anxiety. And by the way, anxiety is also very important. Do not internalize your parents' anxiety. Because your parents' anxiety for you was always that your life is not going to end up well. This is always your parents' anxiety for you. But that will keep you from taking the risks of being the people you were always meant to be. Yeah.
I have a question related to that. So what if your parents, or like what if you or your parents have like genetic anxiety? How do you deal with something like that?
Xanax. I'm not even joking. Like if your anxiety is hereditary and genetic, then it needs medicine. It needs medication. It needs two things. Therapy is going to help you manage it, right? But if it's genetic, then you definitely need to go see a psychiatrist. Not you. You need to go see a psychiatrist because. Genetic anxiety, especially generational anxiety, right? Generational anxiety. My grandmother, during partition, when partition happened, the train before hers the whole train was massacred. When they opened the doors, it was just dead bodies. And she missed that train by 5 minutes. Okay? Then when she got to Karachi, the whole time, she was separated from my grandfather. The whole time. And she stayed in a hostel for women, not knowing if this was going to be her life for the rest of her life. She had anxiety issues for the rest of her life. Rest of her life. Those anxiety issues affected my mother. Okay? And at some point, I had to understand that the anxiety that I feel constantly is a leftover of the generational anxiety my grandmother had from partition. And I had to go see professionals to help me deal with that. Because generational anxiety ain't something you're going to deal with on your own. That's something you're going to need professionals to help you with. And if those professionals hand you a Xanax, take it. Right?
So would you argue that, like, reading the Quran or like serving Allah and like all the other things, would that
same way that if somebody goes blind and they try to recite Quran, like why is Allah not bringing my eyesight back? Like if it's chemical and it's generational, that's what it is. Some things just, like you get, if somebody was born with an issue, right? If they came from a family that has this issue, they were both natured and nurtured into this issue, but that's where we got doctors. If Quran was going to be, if you could just read Surah Al-Fatiha on somebody's head and all of a sudden, like, the hole in it just closes up and the bullet falls out, right? Like, but that's not the way the universe works. That's why we have doctors. It's important to go see specialists. Okay.
Yeah, so like, this is like about like how do we deal with depression with our parents. So I remember you talking about like when you love someone, their like grief and their anxiety and depression become yours. So if you truly love your parents, why wouldn't their like depression?
It will, if you allow it to. And that's my whole point. When somebody you love that much is feeling that much grief, anger, sadness, whatever heavy emotion, right? And you love them, you will internalize it. But you have to make boundaries with yourself. If you don't make boundaries with yourself, it will overwhelm you, and you will not be able to be the person you need to be to help them if you let it overwhelm you. You have to make boundaries with yourself, and the way that you make that boundary is you repeat to yourself, this is not mine. This is not mine. I love affirmations. I didn't even know they were called affirmations until like TikTok. But like, this is just something that like, this is like mental health techniques that you learn, which is you just have to continuously repeat to yourself, this is not mine. This is not mine. Right? And because you have to cast that out of your body, to cast that out of yourself, in order to be the person you need to be, that they need you to be. Otherwise, they'll become very depressed, then you'll become very depressed, and then you'll both sit there like, very depressed. And that doesn't help anybody. Okay. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
So, thank you so much, Jazakallah khair. Just a couple